I work in sales at a company that designs corporate websites. I'm really good at planning and design, so I wanted to work in that department. But even after being with the company for 6 years, I'm still hustling around as a salesman. I'm not very assertive and more of a listener than a talker, so my performance isn't that great. The younger employees often mock me.
John's only strength is that he's diligent.
My boss often says with a sigh. I can't argue with that because it's true.
Results are everything in this job. You know, if you don't get your numbers up, you can't transfer to the department you want.
I know that, but I just can't seem to improve my numbers. At 28, I was feeling the pressure. But then, an opportunity came my way. The manager of the diner I go to every morning for breakfast approached me about creating a website for his chain. They have 30 diners nationwide specializing in siphon coffee, and he said the regional manager was on board with the idea.
Here's Mr. Miller's card. He wants you to come to the headquarters when you have time.
Really? That's great news. Thanks so much.
Well, John, you've been a regular here since we opened after all. Good luck.
The manager gave me a warm smile. I immediately reported to my boss.
Company S, way to go, John.
He was so happy he kept patting me on the back. Well, it's not a done deal yet.
Why are you being negative? You better go for it like your life depends on it. I mean it.
His cheerful demeanor instantly shifted to a stern expression. Yes, sir, I replied and went to the company's headquarters the next day. After introducing myself at the reception, I was taken to a meeting room. Thank you for your time. I stood up, bowed slightly, and handed over my business card. Mr. Miller took my card with one hand, gave it a quick glance, and then carelessly threw it onto the table.
So, what kind of websites do you make?
He sat down heavily and asked me directly. I hadn't been invited to sit, so I took out my laptop and showed him some of the websites our company had developed. For businesses similar to yours, here's an example. This one's for a popular women's cafe with vibrant colors and gentle imagery.
Our customers are mostly older folks, so not many of them are interested in the internet.
I had to bite my tongue to keep from retorting. Then why did you ask me here?
Well, I thought having a website might be a good idea in this day and age. Just design something decent and show me when it's done.
All right. The entire meeting felt demoralizing. No matter what I proposed, Mr. Miller's responses were dismissive. He seemed disinterested and didn't even try to hide his annoyance. I could tell he was the type to enjoy making vendors jump through hoops. Having been in sales for 6 years, I've dealt with many people like him. The thought of future dealings with him was already making me feel depressed.
Let me know when it's done, and send me the estimate too.
He blurted out and quickly left the room. I stood there the whole time. As I left the meeting room with heavy footsteps, I bumped into someone at the main entrance. Oh, sorry. I quickly apologized, and the person I bumped into replied in a calm voice, "No worries, I should have been paying more attention." I looked up to see a man in his 60s. He looked at me with a brief expression of recognition. Have I met him somewhere before? That thought crossed my mind, but I didn't voice it. The man smiled and asked, "Are you here for business with this company?" "Yes, I'm here regarding a website design request."
A website, that's great. May I have your business card?
I handed him my card, and he examined it carefully before tucking it into his breast pocket.
Thank you. Until next time.
The man then walked towards the elevator hall. He was an intriguing individual, but I didn't give it much thought and stepped outside the building. My boss entrusted me with this project, and I was excited to get started. It was the kind of work I'd always wanted to do, so I took it home every night to perfect the plan. A week later, I reached out to Mr. Miller. He wanted to see it the next day and suggested a cafe behind the train station. I arrived 5 minutes ahead of our scheduled time and saw Mr. Miller already sitting there with a coffee, engrossed in his smartphone. I'm sorry for the wait.
No problem at all. Sit down. Want a coffee?
Yes, please. He signaled the waitress and ordered a hot coffee for me. He seemed to be in an unusually good mood today. Without further ado, here's the proposal, and this is the estimated cost.
Aha!
Mr. Miller glanced at the documents. However, he quickly handed them back.
Looks good to me.
Is there anything you'd like to add or change?
No, unless you want to redo the whole thing?
No, but before I could say more, our coffees arrived. I had put a lot of thought into this proposal. Of course, I was confident in it. But could he really make a decision in just the 5 minutes before our coffee arrived? Had he even read through it all?
So, what's in it for me?
He asked with a sly look. What does he mean?
This project wouldn't exist without me, right?
Yes, that's correct.
I heard about it from the store manager. It was my idea to give it a go, right?
Of course, I'm truly grateful.
Then show it. Prove it to me.
What do you mean? I genuinely didn't understand, so I asked him. Mr. Miller clicked his tongue in annoyance.
You're John, right? You're pretty slow. I'm surprised you're in sales.
I'm sorry.
You know, business is all about a win-win, right?
What Mr. Miller then shared was utterly despicable. In essence, he wanted to inflate the estimate and pocket the difference. A silent anger started to build up inside me. You can't seriously expect me to do that, can you?
Ha, well then, guess we're not doing business.
Mr. Miller's smug grin infuriated me. But I knew if I reacted violently, it'd be game over. I clenched my fist and endured. I remembered the cafe manager telling me, hang in there. I was so happy with my first assigned project and worked late every night wanting to do a good job. All of it felt so hollow and painful. If those are the terms, I'll have to decline the offer. Upon hearing that, Mr. Miller's face changed. You being a manager just proves Company S isn't all that. Excuse me. As I was about to get up, Mr. Miller yelled, "How dare you!" and splashed his half-finished iced coffee all over me, soaking me from head to chest. Other customers looked on in shock. Just then, a man sitting behind Mr. Miller stood up and came to his side. To everyone's surprise, the man quietly poured his iced tea all over Mr. Miller's head. Mr. Miller looked up in shock, his face turning pale.
Boss.
The man who was addressed as the boss looked at me. It was the same guy I'd bumped into at Company S's headquarters.
I'm truly sorry for my employees' rude behavior.
The boss deeply bowed to me. Stunned, I just nodded.
Miller, I'm ashamed to have employed someone like you.
Cold anger permeates the quiet voice. Mr. Miller, with tears in his eyes, tried to say something but was sharply interrupted by the boss.
Shut up. I'll decide your punishment later. Now get out of my sight.
Mr. Miller, on the verge of tears, tried to retort, but gave up and quickly ran off from the cafe. The boss, now introducing himself as Mr. Smith, suggested I change into some spare clothes he had and asked if I could accompany him to the headquarters. As soon as he said that, the boss pulled my arm. As he did, I was picked up by the president's car parked outside and led to the president's office at the head office.
I'm sorry for only having my spare clothes. I'll get you a new one later.
No, not at all, thank you. I was overwhelmed with regret when I was handed a high-end shirt that I could see. Sitting face to face, Mr. Smith began to speak.
I had heard rumors about Miller, and today, seeing it firsthand, I was overwhelmed with shame.
Why were you at that cafe?
Some coworkers mentioned Miller would usually meet up there for kickbacks. I knew he had a meeting with you today, so I got there early and waited incognito.
I see. Looking at his distressed face, I had a strange sense of familiarity. It felt as though I had met him somewhere before.
Thanks to your refusal, I was saved. This is the second time you've helped me out.
Second time. We've met before.
Don't you remember?
When asked, I frantically searched my memories. Then, a particular memory stood out. Could it be at the bar?
Yes. Do you remember now?
A joyful expression covered Mr. Smith's face, taking me back to the time we first met 8 years ago. That's right, it was when I was still in college. I was having drinks with a friend at an inexpensive bar. At the bar counter, Mr. Smith was seated next to me, drinking alone. He was talking to the bartender, ranting about something, and I couldn't help but eavesdrop. Looks like he began his own business after quitting his job. This led to his wife, who was against it, moving back to her parents' home with their young daughter.
Tell me, barkeep, why are women so timid? She said I would fail before I even tried.
He downed his drink in one gulp and said, "Another round," pushing his empty glass towards the bartender.
You had a great position at a big company. Seems like a waste to let that go.
Even you were saying that.
It's just a general observation.
The bartender tried to calm him down, but Mr. Smith seemed disheartened. The reason I was intrigued by this stranger was because he reminded me of my own father. My dad also quit his job to open a diner. He suddenly left his job when I was just 6 years old. When my mom found out, she was furious and took me back to her childhood home. My parents ended up getting a divorce. Now, my dad's diner is a popular spot in the local area. I still meet my dad occasionally, but my mom has refused to see him. However, I knew she always regretted the divorce. Mr. Smith's life mirrored my father's. That's why I was so drawn into his story. After a couple more hours, Mr. Smith got really drunk and passed out on the bar counter. I told my friend to go on ahead and waited for Mr. Smith to wake up. As the bartender started closing, I tried to wake him. When I tried to wake him up, he sleepily opened his eyes. He muttered something and slowly opened his eyes, looking disoriented. "Excuse me, can I still place an order?" I asked the bartender and ordered a rice porridge. In a few minutes, a steaming bowl was placed in front of me. The tantalizing aroma stirred my hunger after all the drinking. I served some into a bowl and gently placed it in front of Mr. Smith. "Here, have some. Let's eat together."
Huh?
He looked puzzled.
This young man waited for you to wake up.
The bartender chimed in. Mr. Smith repeatedly thanked me, bowing his head. "Come on, let's eat." We both ate the rice porridge in silence. It was so comforting after all the drinking.
Thank you, that was really kind.
He said with gratitude.
But why do you do all this for me?
I shared the story about my dad. Tears welled up in Mr. Smith's eyes as he listened. "I might be overstepping, but please go back to your wife. I don't want her to have regrets like my mother." Tears ran down his cheeks, and he nodded in agreement.
I've never forgotten the taste of that porridge and your kindness. Thanks to you, I live happily surrounded by my wife and daughter. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here today.
Mr. Smith, now the CEO, stood up and deeply bowed his head. This unbelievable reunion left me in awe, staring at Mr. Smith. After that, Mr. Miller was let go. I was asked by Mr. Smith to work on Company S's website design. The final product was well received and got positive feedback from customers. Thanks to Mr. Smith's recommendations, I received numerous offers from various restaurants. I finally transitioned from sales to planning, doing the job I always wanted to do with great enthusiasm. One bowl of rice porridge connected me and Mr. Smith. Grateful for the miraculous bond and encounter, I live every day to the fullest.